Next, a story of remarkable discovery. UNC Charlotte professor James Tabor, who chairs the Department of Religious Studies, has uncovered archaeological evidence in Jerusalem that he says could revolutionize our understanding of the earliest days of Christianity. The discovery was made in a tomb unearthed during housing construction in 1981, but not explored until Tabor and his team recently undertook a unique excavation.
We didn't tunnel down under the building to actually enter the tomb. What we did was a remote exploration. It had never been done before. Robotic arm. So we were able, like travelers in time, to quietly enter an intact, undisturbed tomb, look around with the camera and film all the ossuaries. And of course, what we're looking for is names, inscriptions, any kind of identifying evidence that would make this more than just one more tomb. Less than 200 feet away from this tomb under the building that we just explored is another tomb that was excavated in 1980, 1 year earlier. It had in it 10 ossuaries, and they're all removed now and they're in the Israeli State Collection. But 6 of them were inscribed with names, and the names have become very controversial because they're names associated with Jesus and his family. Our idea was if you have this tomb, and tombs are usually on family plots, and less than 200 feet away is a second tomb, unexplored, then it makes very good sense to check the second tomb to see if it sheds any light on the first tomb.
Well, let's go ahead and hear and see about the significant discovery.
This is the last thing we looked at, but it shows you in general what we were doing. You can see there the snake camera probe, and those are 2 of the bone boxes. And these 2 bone boxes in particular had engravings on them that absolutely rocked us back on our heels.
What did you see?
Well, what we saw, first of all, was a Greek inscription. This is the decorated front of an ossuary, but you can see between the 2 rosettes there are these, it's a 4-line Greek inscription, and it's fairly easy to read the letters, and we actually were able to sight read it on camera. And what it says is that the wondrous God Jehovah has raised up. The last word then we're still working on, but something like has raised up his Holy One, something about God raising up. And the word there for raise up is the word typically used in the New Testament for Jesus when it says he's been raised up to the right hand of God. So even though it doesn't have the name Jesus on it, this kind of epitaph, a statement about God raising the dead, doesn't occur on any other ossuary. Of the 2,000 ossuaries that have been found over the past 100 years or so in Jerusalem, 600 of them have inscriptions, but nothing like this. Actually 4 lines with a kind of belief statement of some type. We know the followers of Jesus did believe in resurrection, but we considered the possibility that this might be affirming God has raised Jesus from the dead, and if so, it would be the earliest testimony to faith in Jesus' resurrection, which is would be pretty astounding. And it was the next thing we found that made us read this back the other way, that it probably does refer to Jesus.
And that was what?
Well, what that was is a image of a fish with a stick figure human coming out of the mouth. And immediately a couple of us yelled out, Jonah and the whale. It's usually called the big fish in the Bible. Jews don't put images of humans or animals on these ossuaries. Like Muslims, they believe in no graven images of any sort. So this predates the Gospels. This would be oral tradition. This would be somebody that is part of the Jesus movement, that maybe even knew Jesus. This saying is being passed on. We believe in the sign of Jonah, the sign of Jonah. And somebody puts the sign of Jonah on an ossuary next to a Greek statement that God raises the dead. So if we do have a Jonah image, and I say if because this can be debated, but to put it on an ossuary and to have it represent then the resurrection of Jesus would be part of that oral tradition that seems to be circulating, that makes its way into the Gospels.
So, the significance in context of what you believe this to be is?
This is the earliest archaeological evidence of Christianity. Christians were Jews. Normally, you'd expect they would bury their dead like other fellow Jews, but here we have, we think, the beginnings of an expression of Christian faith emerging. Secondly, this is a recording, the sign of Jonah, in picture form of a saying of Jesus that appears later in the Gospel. So a witness to a saying of Jesus before the Gospels were even written. Oral tradition. And finally, maybe most important, testimony that these people believed in the resurrection of Jesus, testimony to their faith in his resurrection. That's extraordinary, I think. I'm teaching at UNC Charlotte. It's not a theological seminary. I'm in a Department of Religious Studies. We're historians. And I tell my students, because students come from all sorts of background, and some of them are very pious Christians in this area of the country, of course. But I tell them, first day, good history is never the enemy of proper faith.